At Luke chapter 21, verse 11, Jesus said, "There will be great earthquakes." Those who teach that the last days are a period of time that began in 1914 say that earthquakes are part of a composite sign. Thus, we may read such claims as, "Significantly, since 1914 there have been more major earthquakes than in any previous period of similar length in recorded history." And, since 1914, the yearly average of reported severe earthquakes has soared to over 11 times what it was during the 1,000 years before then. Is this true? When such statistics are cited, have you ever verified such claims for yourself? Where could you go for answers? What would be a neutral source? Why not consult the experts in such matters? One good source is the U.S. Geological Survey. When asked, why are we having so many earthquakes? Has earthquake activity been increasing? Their answer was, a temporary increase or decrease in seismicity is part of the normal fluctuation of earthquake rates. Because of the improvements in communications and the increased interest in natural disasters, the public now learns about earthquakes more quickly than ever before. Seismologist Charles Richter, creator of the Richter scale, said, "Certain religious groups have picked this rather unfortunate time to insist that the number of earthquakes is increasing. In part, they are misled by the increasing number of small earthquakes that are being cataloged and listed by newer, more sensitive stations throughout the world. It is worth remarking that the number of great earthquakes from 1896 to 1906 was greater than in any 10-year interval since, meaning the year of his writing in 1969. Thus, the evidence is lacking that 1914 proved to be a turning point in the frequency and scale of earthquakes. How about the number of deaths caused by earthquakes before and after 1914? The one thing that we need to keep in mind is that the further back in the past we go, the sparser the historical record is. We do not have a complete picture of past earthquakes and earthquake fatalities. And what characterizes a fatality caused by an earthquake? For instance, the earthquakes in Syria in 1202 directly killed 30,000. However, when combined with associated effects such as subsequent famines and epidemics, there were more than 1 million deaths. Some of the most accurate figures we have come from the Geophysical Data Center. They provide a resource called the Significant Earthquake Database. This database contains over 5,500 earthquake events and lists important statistics, such as the number of deaths. I encourage everyone with an interest to dig in and analyze the data for themselves. Based on this information, this is what I found as a part of my personal research. In the period from 1914 to 2013, there were over 2 million deaths due to earthquakes. However, other periods had high death totals as well. For instance, from 1514 to 1613, there were over 800,000 deaths. From 1714 to 1813, there were over 700,000 deaths, and from 813 to 913, there was a similar figure. But what we must factor in here is the growth in human population. For instance, in the 15 and 1600s, the population of the world was 500 million. In the 1700s, it had ticked up to 600 million. In the 1800s, it had finally reached 1 billion. Around 1914, there were 1.8 billion. Today, the population is 7 billion. So when comparing the 100 years that followed 1914 to that of, say, 1514, we need to keep that in mind. While twice the death toll occurred in the 1914 period, the population in 1914 was 8 times that of the 1500s, and today is 14 times that. Therefore, it is important to take the proportion of earthquake fatalities to the total world population. Is the proportion of earthquake fatalities then commensurate with population growth? Actually, what we find is that the proportion of earthquake fatalities to the population has actually gone down significantly. Why did the world population skyrocket in the 20th century? In part, it is because the decline of famine and pestilence has led to increased life expectancy, which means more people living to adulthood and bearing children. Bear in mind that great earthquakes alone are not said to be the sign, but merely a feature of a sign, along with such things as increasing famines and pestilence. However, as we've seen, while the frequency of earthquakes has remained the same throughout human history, famine and pestilence have drastically been reduced compared to the generations prior to the 20th century.